Hello friends, and welcome to the Hanged Man in the Moon. If this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm pleased to meet you. If you've been here before, thank you for returning. I'm truly honored. Friends, if you have been here before, you know that this is my series in which I use tarot spreads to help me explore topics related to living the intentional life. And before we look at this week's spread, let me ask you a few questions. What is the source of your power? Where does your strength come from? Does your confidence come from your successes? Usually, when we think of things like strength and power and courage, we think of all things bright. We think of the sun. We think of success. We think of new adventures. We think of new experiences, all things bright and shiny. However, what if I were to suggest something else? What if I were to suggest that your confidence actually comes from your failures? What if I were to ask you to consider that your courage comes not from the bright light of the sun, but from the shadows or even the dark? We usually equate light and newness with good, and darkness and shadows and blackness with evil. However, I think that's a very limited understanding, because the good can come from the dark. And that's what this week's spread wants to discuss with us. Our power coming from the dark, our new life coming from the shadows, from failure. So, as usual, again, I have a spread all laid out for us. So let's take a look at that spread. What do you think of this spread? What do you think of the cards in this spread? Unfortunately, this is going to be the last week I will be using these cards because the new moon is coming and the decks will be changed. So if you're interested in these decks and finding out about the creators, as usual, at the end of the video, there will be information about the decks and who created them. And also, as usual, there will be links in the description box below where you can go to if you'd like to purchase one or all of these decks on your own. And remember, I do not get any cash, any remuneration if you go purchase at these sites. I'm just offering the links to aid you on your tarot and oracle journey. So friends, take a look at them. They really are beautiful decks, aren't they? So you saw the spread, you saw the whole layout. And as usual, there's a central oracle message and 4 questions around it, being answered by tarot cards. And for this set of cards, I've been using a central spread of 4 oracles from the Witches, a Compendium of Witches oracle deck. Again, information at the end and below. So, let's take a look at this beauty in detail. This central oracle spread is deeply meaningful, I believe, and calls us to reconsider some of our perhaps long-held beliefs, or at least notions or stereotypes. The stereotype of good being light and evil being dark, for example. And we can understand where those ideas came from. Before we had electric lights, when we were dependent on fire for our light, and our access to fire was limited, for example, 1,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, the dark was frightening. We couldn't see in the dark, we couldn't be active in the dark, and we had to generally, as human beings, with no claws, with no shells, with very limited seeing ability in the dark and no ability to jump up trees like a jaguar, we had to find security and light in the darkness. So it's understandable why we would think of light being good and dark being frightening and evil. However, this spread is asking us to reconsider that notion. And the central card of this spread is the witch. Which witch? You know what I mean. This witch is the priestess. And what do we see in the card? The card has a woman on the ground in a somewhat feline-looking position. Yeah, she's on her knees and her hands are on the ground. At least one hand is on the ground. One hand is holding a pole with a bird of prey on it. And she is the priestess, not the high priestess. That's Tarot. Yeah, this witch is the priestess. And she's also wearing an animal skin on her head. Now we see she's in a cave-like structure, and there's a light glowing from her left side. And she's there in the liminal space between light and dark. And the creator of this deck envisioned this witch as being a witch from the Neolithic era, a long time ago. So this priestess is a Neolithic priestess who works in the light and the shadow. Perhaps is also a shapeshifter. Yeah? Can transform herself into a bird or a cat and explore the night, explore the world of darkness in her various shape-shifted forms. There is another card which is entirely shapeshifter, but we imagine that this Neolithic priestess can also place herself in animal form to explore the darkness. And she has, again, her bird of prey, which is a symbol for far sight, being able to see also in the darkness and also in the light, but at great distances, having broad, wide, clear, long vision. And this priestess, what does she make you think of? She makes me think of the wild wisdom of our ancestors. She makes me think of the innate knowledge that we had before books, before writing. She makes me think of an instinctual knowledge of nature and power. And that's sort of what this oracle is trying to remind us of. This oracle is trying to remind us of, one, being able to master new skills. Now, the priestess knew that while those around her were discovering things like tools and weapons, she knew that power is greater than the weapons that we wield. Power is mastering new skills. One of those skills might be making weapons, certainly, making knives or flint axes or obsidian glass spears, perhaps arrows. But those are not the only skills needed or that we want to have to live in the world. We're not only here to attack and defend. We're here to explore. We're here to create. We're here to manifest. And she knew that all of those things are possible with diverse skills. And she wants to remind us to master our skills. Many of us, especially when we reach a certain age, decide for ourselves that we have learned it all, we know all that we need to know, and that's it. And that is the beginning of the death process. That is the beginning of stagnation. And stagnation is death. Now, we have this image of a cycle of growth and death and growth and death, but that death is not really death. That death is a paring down, a pruning down, and a transformation to new life in a new season. The death that I'm talking about is the preparation to cease to exist, which never really happens. But the death of a stagnant body of water that doesn't support life but increases decomposition. Now that decomposition can fertilize and bring new life eventually, because this universe does not abide death. This universe uses death to bring more life. However, our choice to continue learning, to continue growing, to continue mastering new skills, whatever interests us, whichever direction our flow of intention is drawing us, is leading us, is moving us. Learning the skills that we will use in our development as we continue life is part of this oracle. And it's when we decide that, nope, I'm not going to learn anything, I've learned all that I need to know, that we begin the death process. And that's our choice. This priestess is suggesting that we choose mastering new skills always. And as we do that, we open ourselves again to the powerful force of intention. This priestess is also teaching us to elevate ourselves through knowledge. And we can continue to elevate ourselves. We can continue to grow and learn. Age has nothing to do with it. Economic status has nothing to do with it. Whether we are privileged or not has nothing to do with it. We can all grow and learn if we choose to. It doesn't require cash, money. It doesn't require privilege. This priestess in her cave knows that she can elevate herself by increasing her knowledge. And we can do that too. She's also telling us to consolidate our power. To consolidate our power, what does that mean? Well, where do you see your power? Is your power in a talent you have here, in knowledge you have over here, in the experiences you've had over there, the successes you've had in this place and that place? She's suggesting that we consolidate all of that power into one unified source that will inspire us to move forward and increase our power. Now, what is this power we're talking about? We're not talking about power over. We're not talking about power over other people or over circumstances or over creatures or the environment or over anything in this universe. It's not power over, but power to. The power to create, the power to love, the power to manifest, the power to expand, the power to realize and enlighten and evolve and discover. That is the power that is true power in this universe. And it's that power which is fed by the power of intention. And if that power is scattered and disassembled and placed in diverse areas in our life without connection, our power is weakened. She suggests that we consolidate, that we bring together all of our nuggets of power. And those nuggets of power are not lying only where we can most obviously see them. And I think that is the true depth of this oracle. Again, remember, where is she? Is she seated in the light? Is she seated in the dark? She's seated in that liminal space between both light and dark, because she knows her power is both in the light and in the dark. And it's that consolidation that makes us the most powerful. And today we're going to be focusing more on the dark side than the light side, because the light side is probably pretty clear to all of us. You know when you have mastered this skill, or you have gotten a compliment for doing this thing, or you've felt your power having experienced that experience, loved that love, shared that love, created life. We all know those things pretty readily. When we are in our more positive states, there are times when we forget, certainly. There are times when we forget. There are times when we do feel powerless. We are never powerless, but we feel it. There are times when we feel so angry that we cannot do something, that we cannot be something, that we are being blocked off or restricted or limited or ignored or cast shade upon. And notice that. We say cast shade because it's that shade that's not good to us. The priestess realizes that in that shade, and then even in the dark, there is more power to be found than we readily recognize. So, to recognize that, we have two other oracle cards, one to the left and one at the bottom. To the left, we have the moon. And you've heard me rant about my impression of the moon before, I'm sure. If you haven't, let me give you a brief synopsis. Many people who read tarot and oracle decks see the moon in a very negative light. They see the moon as illusion, as incorrect perception, as falseness, as trickery, as deviousness, as lunacy sometimes. We get that luna, the moon, in Latin languages, luna, lunacy. To me, the moon is not that, is not necessarily that. Just as the sun is not necessarily all brightness and good. The sun can be very destructive. The sun causes droughts. The sun causes cancer. The sun causes a lot of stuff that is not good. As well as a lot of stuff that is amazingly beautiful. It causes life on this planet. But sun without darkness would cause death. We all need darkness. We need a break from the light. We need the time of darkness. Not because it's illusionary, or that it causes madness, but it gives relief. It gives us a place to heal. We can heal in the dark. It's a place where the unconscious is revealed. And it's there that people, I think, get these negative impressions, because frequently what comes up from the unconscious are things like fear, dragon monsters, insecurities, nightmares. All of those negative things can appear in the darkness. Also, wild beasts appear in the darkness. People who are afraid of bats fear the dark, possibly partly because they're afraid of bats. Bats fly around in the darkness, and I know my mother was terrified of bats. Personally, I love bats, but I know my mother was terrified of them. Also rats. Cockroaches come out in the dark. But there's so much more that exists in the dark than just cockroaches and rats and nightmares and our night terrors and demons and evil. There's so much more. Because even all those things are still there in the daylight. We just don't pay attention to them because we can see other stuff that makes us more comfortable. But in the darkness, in the moonlight, the gentle moonlight, the light of softness, the light where we can see in general, where we can see holistically. In the sunlight, we see in detail, in clarity, in minute detail, in minutia. Under the light of the moon, our gaze is softened and we have a broader, expansive, more comfortable view of things. Less stimulated, more comfortable. And in that darkness, we can go into the unconscious. And yes, we can see some of those scary things, but there are scary things in the sunlight too. And we can search for hidden treasures. We can also use our imagination so much more easily in the soft light of the moon than we can in the harsh light of the sun. The moon is gentle, and in the moon we can explore the dark. We can explore those things that were hidden from us and that we turned away from in the bright light of the sun. Because in the darkness of our subconscious, there are jewels. There are treasures waiting for us to discover. And that is the other side of our power. Yeah, there's power in the sunlight, but there's power in the darkness as well. And it's not necessarily evil power. It's not satanic to find power in the darkness. Sorry to any Satanists out there. Those of you who worship Satan, you do you, I'll do me. But the dark is not necessarily a place of evil. And the power in the dark is not necessarily evil power. It can be very creative and it can be very revealing. And also our imaginations can run wild. And when we have repressed our fears, that our imaginations often turn to frightening things. However, if we can deal with our fears, if we can manage those terrors and those frightening experiences and those things that remain in our unconscious, if we can deal with those to some degree, we can start to discover that our imagination is much more fertile. Our imagination can be much more exciting and joyous, and I don't want to say bright because I want to stay away from that sunlight idea, but exciting and effervescent and luminescent in the light of the moon. And that's one source of our strength and our power and our potential is in the unconscious and with our imagination. And all of those is what, for me, the moon represents. And then below, we have a card of ruins. We have a card of ruins. And what do we see? We see a building that apparently was once whole, but has now been battered by time and nature. Now, walls have fallen down. We see only one or two walls standing. There's a door. It looks like there's a window that's perhaps been busted out. Yeah, and the name of the card is Ruins. And we've all seen these. We've seen them in textbooks. We may have seen them in travel programs. We may have seen them ourselves in our own travels or in our neighborhoods, perhaps even. Yeah, ruins can be there from ancient times, and also there are current ruins, modern ruins from warfare. Yeah, from bombs and grenades leave buildings in ruins. Now, London experienced a city of ruins for a time after World War II. And there are places currently in the world that have ruins strewn about because of warfare. And those ruins often cause sadness, often cause hidden pain to well up that we will either notice or not. That this was once a complete and beautiful thing and now it is destroyed. So how is this a place for power for us? Something that's been destroyed either by time, by nature, or by bombshells. Where is power in that? It's a reminder that the feelings that we feel when we see these ruins, those feelings of perhaps sadness or ache or longing for the wholeness that once was there, those feelings are there because those ruins are a mirror for us of our unconscious contents within our subconscious mind, our own pain, our own agonies, our own experiences of wounding and ruins that are left over from things that happened to us in the past, our bright, shiny selves that were knocked down and beaten up from experience. It's that mirroring from which those emotions arise. And the ruins teach us about our past experiences. Those ruins teach us about our personal wounds. And our power also comes from those. I'm sure you've heard it told that scar tissue is a good thing. It doesn't look pretty. These ruins perhaps don't look pretty to you. It doesn't look pretty, but it's there for a purpose. It's actually stronger tissue than the tissue that was there before. When we cut ourselves or when we have surgery and the wound heals, that scar tissue is stronger than the skin that was there before. Yeah? We heal from our wounds and we become stronger. And the wounds that we have down there in our unconscious or in our preconscious, or that we've pushed off to the side so that we don't have to think about them, those wounds are a source of our power, if we allow them to be. We can also allow them to be a source of our manipulation, which is a kind of power, I suppose. Yeah? We can often use our victimhood to manipulate others, to get things that we want. Yeah? I am the wounded one, so you have to do this for me. I am the ruined one, so you have to take care of me. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help. I'm not saying that. Yeah? When we are wounded, we need help. Certainly. Certainly, we deserve help. We want help. We want to be able to feel free to ask for help and to receive help. However, that can progress to a stage of unhealthiness. That can progress to a stage of using the wound as a tool, using the wound as a way to manipulate others. And that's not the power we're talking about here. We don't want to use the wound to make others do for us. We don't want to use the wound to get stuff or to hide in. Some of us also hide in our wounds so that we can't be seen and we can be taken care of. Beyond the beginning stages where we do need to be taken care of for healing. There are some of us who live in our wounds as a shelter from the outside world. That's not the power that we're speaking of here. We're thinking of the power that we gained when we overcame the wounds, when we learned to forgive the other, when we learned to heal what has been wounded, when we have learned to reconstruct in some fashion what was knocked down. That is a source of power. And a lot of times we have that power, and then we have the power in the light, and ne'er the two shall meet. And this witch, the witch of the priestess, is telling us to consolidate those powers, to consolidate the power of our health and the power that came from our wounding. The beauty that we were born with and the beauty of our scars and our wrinkles and the lines on our faces. Our power can come from so many different places, and to consolidate that. And once it's consolidated, to look and investigate and realize how much power we actually have. And then to take that power forward. Again, not to lord it over others, not to use it against others or to use over others, but to do, to exist, to create, to grow, to evolve. And then that third card is the reminder that once we have done that, once we've consolidated the power that we have from the light and the power that we have from the darkness and from our wounds, when we've consolidated all of that, we have our distaff, which in this deck, the distaff, which looks kind of like a little rod or a little wand, yeah? This is the Distaff of Authority. The authority to do, to exist, our worthiness. It's the Distaff of Influence. Not controlling, not making other people change or making other people do, but influence. Because when we are in our power, and our power has consolidated, as the priestess has suggested, we have influence. We don't have to coerce, we don't have to manipulate, we can influence. And we can have patience because we have our power. We're not anxious to make things happen. We allow things to happen in their natural course because we are flowing with the powerful force of our intention, and we are allowing others to flow with the powerful force of their intention at their pace. And we can influence them back into their power. It's our experience and the power of our experiences, both in the light and in the dark, in the sunlight and in the moonlight, in our health and in our woundings and healings. And so you see the priestess there in her cave, exploring both the light and the dark with her staff, her distaff of authority and influence and experience, as she masters new skills and consolidates her power and elevates her knowledge and becomes. That's what she's reminding us to do, to become full, complete, both light and dark. Does this make sense to you? I hope it does. I hope you can re-envision what the dark can mean for you, what the moonlight can mean for you. That we can interpret it as illusion, but also as imagination. That we can interpret it as fear, but we can also interpret it as our unconscious contents reflecting back to us. That we don't have to be afraid of them. That we can look, accept, and then explore. What else lies there? So friends, we have 4 questions to ask of this central spread of oracle cards. And let's get to that first question. The first question is, where is movement needed? And I don't know if you noticed that, but in the discussions of the darkness and the moon, there is a feeling of moving and exploring. And so movement is needed for life and for our evolution. One of the definitions of life is movement, being able to move, being animate. So, to more fully embrace our life, we want to fully embrace movement. And where is our movement needed for us in order to become the priestess, the Neolithic priestess? And we have two cards answering that question, one from the Witch's Wisdom Tarot and one from the Green Witch Tarot. From the Witch's Wisdom Tarot, we have the Six of Water, which is the Six of Cups in a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And if you recall the Six of Cups in Rider-Waite, you remember that there are two small-looking people. They could be children. They are not necessarily children. I think there's some little bit of discriminatory eyesight or gaze in deciding those two beings are necessarily children because they are small. Just saying. They're two smaller beings. Yeah. One holding a cup to the other, and we look at this as a card of nostalgia and childhood and past experiences. The Six of Water in the Witch's Wisdom deck is very different. We see a bird, I believe it's a heron, diving into the water to get fish. And there's a school of fish swimming to the right. And so what do you think? You think feeding, perhaps. And I suppose feeding could be part of this particular image on this card. However, in the book, it describes it as a deep dive. It describes it as letting go. It describes it as unexpected change. And I suppose for the fish swimming by, the heron coming down and grabbing it is certainly unexpected change. But I don't think that's the unexpected change that this deck is pointing to. First, let's look at deep dive. When we talked about the moon and the unconscious, I think that's where this deep dive is relevant to us right here. Yeah? Diving deep into the unconscious, diving deep into the dark is one place that movement is needed. Movement doesn't always have to be forward or back or to the side. It can also be down deep. And here, this time, the movement that is needed is a deep dive into our unconscious and discovering what treasures lie there. The movement can also be this kind of movement. Yeah, a letting go of control, letting go of the reins, letting go of needing to be in the light, and allowing ourselves to merge with the unconscious, to merge with the water, to merge with our emotions, to dissolve, to surrender to our unconscious, rather than being afraid and hiding from it or protecting ourselves within it, but to surrender to it. Knowing that we're safe, because that's us. Our unconscious is us. And being afraid of ourselves is unfortunate. Yeah, allowing ourselves to surrender to the movement that exists in our subconscious, in our unconscious, in our complexes and our archetypes that are all flowing within the sea of our unconscious. To dissolve into the river of life as well. A river of life which we can also imagine as the river of intention. Now, dissolving ourselves into the river of life and becoming life, becoming the movement of intention, and letting it pass through us as well. As we become one, as we integrate with this river of life, we also notice it moving through us as it moves us forward. As we dive deep into our unconscious, we integrate with our unconscious and we discover so much power there. And we surrender to that power and learn from it and grow from it and heal within it and heal it and evolve. That is what this card is reminding us. And with all of that movement, unexpected change is certain to occur. Because it's not change that we are creating, but change that is allowed by us as we move both in and forward, into the water and forward with the current of the river. Yeah, the Huron, if the Huron stayed at the top of the water like most of us stay, except those of us who go into snorkeling and scuba diving and deep swimming, for most of us, we stay above the waterline. And if the Huron stayed above the waterline, it would starve and die. The Huron needs to dive into the water to find food, to find its nourishment, and so do we. We find a lot of nourishment diving deep into ourselves and allowing ourselves to move with the river and current and flow of life, allowing it to penetrate us. And as it penetrates us, enliven us and move us forward in the direction of our intentions, in the direction of the lives we want to lead, in the direction of the loves we want to create, the art we want to express, the work we want to do, the experiences we want to have, all of that. And then the next card, also answering where is movement needed, is the sun. Why? Because a lot of us, when we think of diving deep into the unconscious, take it from the perspective of fear and discomfort and going somewhere you don't really want to go. Going into the darkness and feeling around and what's going to be out there? Oh, what is that? What is that? The sun is trying to remind us that as we do this, as we dive deep and as we integrate ourselves with the power, the life force of this universe, that we do it with the attitude of the sun. We can be the sun going into the dark. You know that the Egyptians believed that the sun, after it had made its course, went down into the darkness and was moved along by the scarab to arise the next day. Now, the sun goes into the darkness. It doesn't change the darkness. It doesn't make the dark daylight. It goes down into the darkness, causing darkness above and experiencing darkness, and then comes back up the next day. So the sun itself, in ancient belief, experienced darkness, and so can we. And we can be the sun moving into the dark, moving into unconscious, so that we can see what's there. We can go into that unconscious area, into the dark, with the attitude of positivity, of fun. We can carry the warmth and vitality of the sun into that area, not to change it, but so that we can experience it more fully. We can be more open to the experience rather than being frightened and protective. The sun card is the card of attainment, because as we discover the treasures that lie there, as we discover who we are, as we move integrated in the river of life, we attain power, we attain knowledge, we attain wisdom. We become success. Success doesn't become limited to those events in our lives, but we become success. We are success. Even in our failures, we are success. Even in the darkness, we are success. And we can be comfortable there. And that's where movement is needed. Yeah? We want to be the sun as we dive deep and move forward and open ourselves to experience of light and dark. So let's take a look at the second question, because it'll help us on this journey. This second question, what is the easier way? And what do you think? Has what I've described so far sounded kind of hard? Kind of oppressive, maybe? kind of like I'm expecting too much, or God or whoever or the universe is expecting too much of us to go into the dark, to be the sun in the dark. So what is the easier way? And we have two answers. The Witch's Wisdom Tarot is telling us to be the Witch of Fire, to embody our Witch of Fireness. And the Green Witch Tarot is reminding us of the Nine of Athens. And let's look at both of those. So, the Witch of Fire. In a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, this would be the Knight of Wands. And the knights in this deck are the witches. I love this deck. I've really come to love this deck, and the way it has restructured the ideas and meanings of the tarot, so they're all there, but in very different forms and very different places, and very differently gendered as well, which is wonderful. I love that. And because there's still balance. So, again, the Witch of Fire. The Knight of Wands being the Witch of Fire. She is, you can see that, where is she? She's in her cave. She's very much like that priestess. She's in her cave, and she's got fire there. She's got smoke billowing up. Now, smoke, which we believe often limits our perceptions, but here the Witch of Fire is reveling, I believe, in the smoke, in the incense perhaps. Because in that smoke, she can look within. Now, this Knight of Wands is the Knight of looking within. She's the Knight of knowing herself, of our knowing ourselves, looking within to gain wisdom, discovering what we truly want. That's one of the jewels that lie down there. Now, one of the jewels that lie in our unconscious is knowing what we want. And often, have you yourself said, or have you heard other people say, I don't know what I want. I know there are so many things out there. There are so many possibilities. I just can't choose. I don't know what I want. I've heard many people say that. I've said that myself, especially when I was a teenager. When I was a teenager trying to decide my future, and I don't believe we should be forcing teenagers like 18, 19-year-olds to decide the course of their lives when they're trying to get into a university. I personally believe that's an unnecessary burden and does not help. However, we all experience times when we don't really know what we want. And so we go within. We go within to discover what we truly want. And that might be a surprise. It's the card of finding gold in the dark, which is what I've been talking about all this time, right? Finding gold in the dark. So, what is the easier way? Doing what we've been saying up till now, but perhaps simplifying it. Just look within. Look within. Release your resistance to what is there. Look within. And believe it or not, that is the easier way. And the next card, the Nine of Athens, which is the Nine of Swords in a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And you know that in a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, what we usually see is a person lying in a bed, looking like it's the deep, dark night. And there are 9 swords on the wall above the bed. And the person is awaking from what apparently was a nightmare. And this is the nightmare card. It's a card of anxiety and fear and worry and perhaps even depression, grieving. So how is that the easier way? Well, just as the sun was a reminder to go into the dark with a fun, positive attitude, this Nine of Athens, this Nine of Swords card is a reminder that when we go down there, we're going to find some anxiety. We're going to find some worry. We're going to find some fear. And knowing that in advance, being, as we say, good with that, accepting that we will find those things as we go there, and that we don't have to be reactive. We can allow them to be as they are and look at them. Look at them, observe them. Perhaps even embrace them for what they are. For the frightened child that hides within. For the grieving, perhaps, widower that lies within. For the grieving child who has lost their parents, that lies within. For the powerless one who lies within those feelings of unworthiness or depression. Embracing those parts of us. And it's in embracing those parts of us that we can heal. And it'll take time. It takes time, certainly, to love our wounded ones into as much wholeness as we can achieve. So, believe it or not, that is actually the easier way. Easier than going out into the world and struggling and fighting and tearing your way, clawing your way to either the top or the side or somewhere else. This is the easier way. It's going into the dark, looking within, finding self. Who are we? And remember last week we had the witch was one of authenticity. And this leads directly from that, I believe. We want to go within and discover who is down there and what that person wants. And realize that we're going to see those Nine of Swords scars or worries or fears scattered here and there. And be able to be ready to embrace them. Rather than trying to fix them, rather than trying to hide them, rather than trying to scold them out of existence, rather than trying to bury them even farther. Be ready to embrace those as much as we can. We don't have to fix everything in one instant. But be prepared. Be prepared for those as we go in and look for gold, because there's gold down there. In there. There. And that's really the easier way. Do you believe me? I hope you do. It really is the easier way. Let's take a look at that third question. This third question almost made me laugh, because it is so appropriate in this line of question, right? The first, where is movement needed? Movement is needed down, within, and into, and out, and surrendering, and that movement of surrender. What is the easier way? The easier way is down and in, and surrender and embracing. So the next question is, what if I wasn't afraid? Because that movement, that easier way, is probably pretty frightening to anyone who's had any experience with the unconscious and with the dark and with the moon and all of those things out in nature. There's some fear there. There is some fear there. So what if I wasn't afraid? And the first answer is the Ten of Air, which, interestingly, in a Rider-Waite-Smith deck is the Ten of Swords. And the Ten of Swords is the card with the person lying down in the very, very deep, dark night with a little bit of light starting to break in the horizon, but in the deep, dark night with 10 knives stabbed into their backs, blood flowing out. A card of endedness. Yeah? And really the card that tells us what the extremity that our negative thoughts can have on us, how much we can defeat ourselves, how we can practically kill ourselves with our thoughts. This deck instead is teaching us something very different. And what do we see in this card? We see a Murmur of Starlings. A Murmur of Starlings. You've seen starlings either in person or on television, I'm sure, where you have a large group of starlings that fly in one mass that kind of looks like one cloud or one amoeba maybe, or some single cell organism just moving through the air in waves and curves, and it's beautiful and somehow just a little bit overwhelming, especially if you're a little close to them, because there's a lot of sound and all that flapping of wings. It's not like a single eagle soaring high above the air. There's a lot of movement, a lot of sound, and a lot of flapping, and a lot of moving in waves. But a Murmur of Starlings is this card. And this card teaches us wonderment. This card teaches us intuitive harmony, because the way that these starlings move about and move together is not because they have a flight plan. They don't have Bluetooth and a microphone saying, okay, everybody get ready, we're going to turn right now. That doesn't work that way. Yeah? They move in concert by intuitive harmony, by their heart's wisdom. This is a card of the heart's wisdom. And those are all things that we would have available to us if we weren't afraid. When we go down into our unconscious or go into the dark, if we had that sense of, instead of fear, wonderment. What magical beings lie here? What mysterious treasure lies here? The intuitive harmony within ourselves, because this is ourself. Our heart's wisdom that can guide us in the dark, through the unconscious. That can guide us as we move with the powerful current of intention. What if I wasn't afraid? I would consciously feel divine love penetrating everywhere. Which it does. Divine love is everywhere. It's here, it's there, it's in the space between us, it's in our bodies, it's in the chairs we are sitting on, it's in our devices that we use to watch this video. Divine love permeates, is everything. More than permeates. Divine love is everything. Manifests as everything. And if I weren't afraid, I would let my spirit soar. And not only would I let my spirit soar, I would let my spirit dive. I would let my spirit dive into my unconscious with joy, with rapture, with wonderment, if I wasn't afraid. And the next card, right beside it, is the Ace of Chalices, which I'm sure you already know would be the Ace of Cups in a Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And this is a card of love. If I weren't afraid, I would experience love. Yeah, divine love, my own love, which is inseparable from divine love. Compassion which flows from love, with love. I would feel my creativity. I would experience my creativity. I would experience creativity as myself. I would know. I would be abundance. I would be abundance. Abundance is not only something we experience out in the world. We are abundance. And that's what the Ace of Cups is reminding us. We are abundance. We are that potential of abundance. We are affirmations. Affirmations are not something they are something we do. We can do it, affirmations. However, we are affirmation. We are yes. Which is partly why when we focus on negative things, when we focus on things that we don't want, they appear more to us. They come to us more because we are affirmation. The universe is affirmation. We give something attention and we and the universe say yes. Yes, traffic jams. Yes. Yes, lost wallets. Yes. Let's experience that more. That's where we're focusing. Let's experience that more. Now, it's an affirmation. We are affirmation. We are not negation. Negation does not truly exist outside of grammar. It's a construct. It's a grammar construct. However, negation does not really exist. The more we push something away, the more power we're giving it to grow and exist, to engulf us. It's a card of new relationships as well. And so if I weren't afraid, I'd have the relationships I'd wanted. I'd be the relationship. I would be ready for the relationships that I wanted if I weren't afraid. And so, as we dive in and we experience wonderment without fear, as we experience our abundance, we experience ourselves as abundance and affirmation without fear, we have our power again. We've consolidated our power to create, to become, to evolve, to experience, our power to love. Let's take a look at the fourth question. So you've noticed the flow, haven't you? We started with the witch in that liminal space between light and darkness, teaching us to search out and discover and explore our power in the less obvious parts of ourselves. Then we ask, where is movement needed? Then what is the easier way? And we get a similar answer from that question. And then if I wasn't afraid, we get a way to experience that movement, to experience that easier way. And now the question is, what's the healthy choice? What is the healthy choice? The two answers we get are interesting, are beautiful. The first answer is the Craftsman of Water. The Craftsman of Water in a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, the placement of this craftsman, his placement, this is a male figure. In the book, it's a male figure as well. His placement is in the Queen of Cups place. Yeah? The Craftsman of Water is the Queen of Cups. And the meaning for the Craftsman of Water, being a male figure, male energy in this deck, is active fertility. Active fertility. What does that mean? It means planting seeds. It means imagining. It means doing the work for things to grow. Irrigating. Plowing. Now, all of the active stuff that is helpful to create growth, to create development. That's the Craftsman of Water. And this is an emotional work, right? We do the active emotional work of creating the potential for things to grow, creating the space, the environment for things to grow, emotionally to grow. So, we are open to unexpected results with this craftsman. Because as we try to control outcomes, we close off, we become rigid. We've cut off at least half of our power. As we try to control things in the light, we cut off our power from the shadow and the dark. This is the craftsman of embodied joy and sensual pleasures. Yeah, that active embodiment of joy. Not only feeling or receiving joy or experiencing joy, but intentionally embodying joy. Now, I hope you know, that an intentional life is an emotional journey. Yeah? It's a journey of continually opening ourselves to the powerful force of intention, moving us forward in our lives. And when we're afraid, when we're angry, when we feel powerless, we close ourselves off from everything, including intention. And we can never completely cut ourselves off from intention. We're always in that river of moving intention, but we close ourselves off from the movement and we perhaps sink. We can imagine ourselves sinking in the river, not in the way that we hope to dive into the unconscious and open ourselves to what's there, but closed off and sinking, so that we move much more slowly. We move, but what would otherwise take moments might take 1,000 years for us to get there. That's not the kind of diving that we're talking about here. The diving that we're talking about here is an open diving, a diving of openness and exploration and wonderment, right? So, the intentional life is an emotional journey. And it's an emotional journey because it's a journey where we are constantly checking in with our emotions to see how well we're moving or how poorly we're moving with the powerful flow of intention. The better we feel, the more we are moving. The poorer we feel, the less happy, the less powerful, the less empowered we feel, the less we have access to the powerful force of intention. So that's why this is an emotional journey. We're always checking in with our emotions. And this card is reminding us to embody joy. Also embody love, embody well-being, and embody pure awareness. To embody joy. To make that choice to move in the direction of joy. Which we can do. We can choose the direction that we are moving with our emotions. Yeah? Somebody slaps us, we get this sudden hit of anger or perhaps fear, and then we have the choice. Now, if you meditate, and you've been meditating for years perhaps, and you're able to separate yourself, to put some space between yourself and your emotional reactions, you might have the space to make a choice earlier, before the anger or the fear arises. However, most of us, we get slapped, we immediately feel that anger or that fear. And then we have a choice. What are we going to do with that? Are we going to dive into that anger and fear, or are we going to realize it and think, okay, this fear, this anger is disempowering me. And the sooner that I can move away from fear, away from anger, to something else, the more quickly I will be empowered. I will feel my power. I will return to my ability to flow with intention. And that return to a more positive state is going to depend on where you're starting, where we are starting, where I am starting. If I'm starting at anger, expecting myself to, in 2 seconds, arrive at joy is unreasonable and pretty much impossible. However, I can move from fear into something a little less disempowering. I can move from fear or anger into, okay, wait a minute. Just a second. What can I do? Now, something a little bit more centered, a little bit more, perhaps irritation, perhaps desiring for something to react, desiring to move forward in reaction, perhaps revenge, or perhaps no. And then when I realize that, okay, I'm here, where can I go? I can go back to fear. It's an entirely possible choice. Or I can move from here to, okay, just a second, I can do something else. Perhaps a little bit of pessimistic, perhaps a little bit discouraged, but discouraged is a lot better than angry and fearful. Discouraged. And then we realize, okay, here I am, what can I do? Okay, I don't have to stay here. I can calm down. Okay, things are not as bad as it was just a slap. I can survive this. Things are not as bad as I'm making them out to be. And I can move slowly closer to a more positive feeling. And that's what I think this idea of embodying joy is. It's not the expectation that I am, boom, here I am joyful. Yeah, bang, boom, I'm joyful. I mean, there are some people who might be able to do that. That's not me. However, embodying joy can be a process. And so, what is the healthy choice? The healthy choice is to do that process, to move towards joy, to allow ourselves to embody joy, however much time that takes. Why is that healthier? It's healthier for two reasons. One reason is that it allows us to open up to the powerful force of intention and moves us forward, which moves us forward in the direction of the lives we want to live. Also, it's more healthy because we know that those stress emotions, anger, fear, do physical damage to us. And as Colette Baron-Reid says, it's like drinking poison expecting the other person to die. Now, the more fear we feed, the more anger we feed, the more we drink poison, the more poison we drink, and that's not healthy. It's not healthful and it's not healthy. So, the more healthy choice is to move in the direction of joy, to embody joy. And the next card is, the card right beside it is, and you see, well, I'm sorry, just a moment. The Craftsman of Water, what do we see? We see a man holding up a stick of some sort. It looks like he's in the process of doing a rain dance to bring water. Yeah? The active calling forth of water, of calling forth emotion, of calling forth joy to feed the barren soil. He is dancing. He is dancing, and that's where that comes into. He's not waiting for joy to appear. He's not waiting for himself to start feeling better. He's doing what he needs to do to create, to embody joy. The active fertility. And then right beside it, we have the Wild Hunt, which in a Rider-Waite-Smith deck is the Tower, which most tarot readers do not like. Well, many tarot readers do not like. I actually like the Tower because it gives you a choice. It gives you a heads up and gives you a choice. I believe. Because if this isn't something that is happening now or has just happened or has happened in the past, if it's something that appears, we can take action. We can do something about it. Because the Tower, the Wild Hunt, tells us that it's a card of sudden change. And we have the choice. We can do the change ourselves or we can wait for it to happen. And if we take our control and we create the change ourselves, things will go so much more smoothly and we'll be so much healthier in the process. It's a card of chaos, and chaos can be very creative. Yeah, our unconscious can be a very chaotic place. And that could be the Tower as well. Yeah, diving into the chaos of our unconscious. That could be what this Tower is telling us, as well as change, creating change. It could be the card of revelation. Yeah, bursting forth from this structure, this shell, this protective fortress. As the walls crumble and burst apart, we break free. It can be a card of freedom. If we take the active role of breaking down the walls, breaking the chains. It can be the card of awakening. Yeah? That moment of enlightenment can be a tower moment where unhealthy ego bursts apart, or at least is recognized for what it is. And I don't want to call ego unhealthy, because there is healthy ego and there is unhealthy ego. And unfortunately, ego accrues a lot of unhealthy habits, unhealthy ideas, unhealthy beliefs as we live. And it's that sick ego that needs treatment, that needs to have that slime that has covered it to be scraped off. The walls that have been built up around it to be broken down. And that's a tower moment. Yeah? The breaking, the shattering of the unhealthy covering of the ego so that it's broken free and pure, as it was the moment we were born, before it learned so many bad habits. It's also the card of upheaval and catastrophe, but if we take a proactive attitude, it doesn't have to be catastrophic. It doesn't have to be total upheaval. If we break the wall down at our own speed and we start as soon as possible, and we start doing the work of dismantling, it doesn't have to be catastrophic and it doesn't have to be upheaval. But we can also just sit there and wait for it to happen. And certainly it will probably be catastrophic to some extent and upheaval to some extent. The healthy choice is to take a proactive attitude towards it, which is part of that rain dancer, right? That rain dancer, creating fertility. Part of creating fertility is creating space. And part of creating space is going to be breaking down the walls that are limiting our space for growth. And it's from that our power is recognized. And once that fertility happens, once we have broken free, we can again become our priestess, who is mastering new skills, who is consolidating our power, who is elevating our knowledge, who has burst free from the walls that have been causing death and stagnation. So what do you think, friends? Do you notice how last week's reading and this week's reading flow so naturally one from the other? Do you notice how looking in the darkness can be a very powerful thing, an empowering thing, and one that can help us discover so much beauty and power and love as well? Friends, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear from you. What do you think? What has this stirred up in you, if anything? I'd love to hear in the comments below. And hit that like button if you enjoyed seeing this, if you enjoyed listening to me speaking about this, if you enjoyed this spread. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and hit the alarm bell so that you get notifications of when I upload. I usually upload at least once a week. And share this with someone who you think might get benefit from it. I'd love this to go out into the world, if you would love it to go out into the world as well. And comment below. I'd love to interact with you. I'd love to engage with you. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear how you imagine yourself moving through your intentional life, where you believe you can discover your power. And as always, friends, there will be information in just a moment about the decks, so stay tuned for that. And I wish you love, joy, well-being, and pure awareness. Thank you.